Alright everyone, welcome to live stream today, Force 13. We are here today with the team right now. We are with David and Lee right now. We're going to potentially have other people join us in. Why don't you guys say hello?
Hi from David.
Yeah, good evening. Lee.
How are you guys all doing today right now?
Well, considering I'm over here on the east coast of Australia, I've just put out a update on the severe weather impacting 4 states on mainland Australia. So it's a very busy time for me over here on the AU channel, but what does one say about the activity in the Northern Hemisphere? And it's good to be here again, and hi to our viewers.
Lee, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Had a quiet day, but I'm doing good.
Well, as some of you may know, we have a lot to cover tonight. There are still 5 active storms right now and another invest that is about to form. We have Hurricane Hector, still a Category 3, completed its eyewall replacement cycle last night and is now actually moving away from its main area of Hawaii. It's moving away from the Big Island and actually has a tropical storm watch in effect, if I'm not mistaken, on one of the islands. I'll pull it up right now for you guys. Here is going to be the map source right here. Here's the current map. You can see here's the track for 3 days. There is a more definitive track forecast now. Models are saying that high pressure will steer it around and eventually recurve it to the northwest and then back north and northeast at the end. Let's see, what's the warning right now? We do have a tropical storm watch in for Johnston Island right now. It's low population, not a huge concern, but here's the current 5-day cone right now with the system, and it is expected to start recurving up and weaken slowly over the next couple of days. It was actually weaker earlier. It did re-intensify a bit, but it should continue a weakening trend at this point forward. I mean, you guys have been seeing Hector over the past day or so now. What are you guys looking at with the storm?
Well, it's maintained an eye. I'm just going to have a look at the information, and Lee, if you like to respond whilst I look at the information.
Well, Hector's definitely been quite the storm, hasn't it? It's formed from the eastern side of the East Pacific, and it's past Hawaii and very close to becoming a Westpac storm. I know the last storm to do this was Hurricane Olaf, but it's going to be impacting Johnston very soon. But very not badly. I don't think it's merely tropical storm winds and some rain from it, but I think it's mainly uninhabitable, Johnston. I don't know much about Johnston. So.
Yeah, fortunately the island is not very inhabited at all. It is remote. That's, what we usually see with a lot of the Pacific islands out there. More remote and not really particularly inhabited in general. Right next to my face cam, you can actually see the GFS 18Z model run for what it shows Hector doing over the next week or so. You can see it shows a more pronounced northwest turn and slow weakening, probably dissipating right near the end of the run as it starts to recurve to the northeast at that point in time. It's pretty clear at this point. It's pretty much a uniform agreement that weakening should occur from here, but it's still maintaining a pretty good structure. Its eye has gotten much larger in general. Speaking of other systems that we do have Tropical Storm Shanshan. It was yesterday impacting Japan at a much more significant intensity of a typhoon status at that time, but it has weakened significantly since then. Now expected to go post-tropical within a day. I'm going to pull up some satellite imagery of the storm for us right now, and you can see how much the storm has degraded in general. Here it is right now. I'll pull it up. And the storm as a whole, it's looking non-tropical at this point. Convection's really displaced and much weaker than yesterday in general. Down towards the bottom right, you can actually see the history of it evolving over the past day. You can see it was looking much more tropical back then and was actually delivering typhoon sustained winds to the very eastern area just north of Tokyo metro area, but it's fallen off substantially then. What do you guys think? Because initially the JTWC thought it maintained its strength a bit longer than it actually has.
Lee, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just missed what you asked there, actually.
Oh, just Typhoon, what is now former Shanshan.
Well, I thought Shanshan was a bit of a mess, actually. I wasn't that impressed with Shanshan. But I think it's definitely causing pretty bad conditions on that east coast of Japan at the moment. But I do agree that with what Strat said, is it will post-tropical within the next year or so.
And Strat, I've got the latest. As mentioned, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre has finalised its position. However, it will be closely monitored for signs of regeneration, which is their normal response. Tropical Storm 17W Shanshan is located 164 nautical miles northeast of Narita Airport and has tracked east and northeast at 8 knots over the last 6 hours. And wave height at this point in time, or a few hours ago, was 22 feet. And going back to, Hector, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre's track chart has it tracking towards Midway, and Midway is in the cone of uncertainty. I'll just have a quick look for information from the Japanese Meteorological Agency on Shanshan.
Yeah, the storm has really fallen apart on its satellite imagery over the past 12 hours or so, really. It's really nothing of what it was even yesterday, and at that point, it already wasn't really looking as tropical. It didn't really have a clear eye at that point, although it was clearly still an intense system at the time as well. But since then, it's really just kind of fallen apart. And I want to address some questions we've been seeing in chat. There's actually been some questions about Debby. Debby went post-tropical earlier today. Here's the National Hurricane Center right here. Debby went post-tropical. The advisory was issued less than 3 hours ago on the system. It has become post-tropical. The circulation of the cyclone's become ill-defined and is no longer producing enough organized convection.
Interrupt a minute.
Yeah?
According to Nelson, the stream's not working.
The stream is working just fine.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Sure?
You'll just have to, anybody that's experiencing issues with the stream, just refresh the page.
Just refresh the page.
Because I have noticed it. And Debby Strat is currently located 45.1 degrees north, 42.0 degrees west. Wind is 35 knots, and central pressure is 1,004 millibars.
Here's some satellite imagery infrared of Debby right now. You can tell it's mostly opened up at this point into a trough. Circulation's mostly gone. You can see circulation right here. That's the center of the system, but convection's too displaced at this point and too broad to really be called a tropical cyclone. Going back here quickly to the National Hurricane Center homepage, you can look here. This is current position on the map, current small wind field, and they actually expect it to completely dissipate and be absorbed within the next 12 to 24 hours as well. So, that's really it with Debby at this point, not much else to talk about. What there is something to talk about, though, is probably 96W. I know David's been keeping a close eye on it for most of the past day now. There was a formation warning issued by the JTWC recently, if I'm not mistaken.
The Joint Typhoon Warning Centre has issued a tropical cyclone formation alert. and I'm just the area convection invest 96 W, previously located near 16.8 degrees north, 113.3 degrees east, is now located near 18.8 north, 113.1 east, about 220 nautical miles southwest of Hong Kong. Animated and enhanced infrared satellite imagery and a microwave image depicted consolidated, though still elongated, low-level circulation with convection confined to the rest of the low-level circulation.
Yeah, you can see I do have it actually up right now here, the infrared satellite imagery of the system. It's really heavily sheared, and it's been like that for the past 2 days, really. Actually, most of its lifespan as an invest. But the problem with it, even though it's not a tropical cyclone yet, is the rainfall that's producing over Hainan Island and northern Vietnam at this point. These areas have already seen a lot of rain in the past month or so. They had Sun Tin pass through the exact region, came from the Philippines westward, crossed Hainan Island into northern Vietnam, dissipated, still producing lots of heavy rain, came back over the South China Sea and reformed, stalled for a few days, producing even more rain before moving into Hainan Island and then back into China and Vietnam again. So seeing a system like this constantly producing heavy convection for over 2 days now is kind of worrying to see for the region.
And strat maximum winds displaced about 100 nautical miles from the center. Vertical wind shear is low to moderate, 5 to 15 knots, increases sharply to the south. Upper level divergence in easterly flow is also weak. Sea surface temperatures in the South China Sea remain favourable at 28 to 30 Celsius. Global models are in strong agreement at 96 W, will consolidate over the next 24 hours with some spread in near-term track solution, generally moving the system northward. Maximum sustained surface winds are estimated at 18 to 23 knots. Minimum sea level pressure is 999 millibars, and the potential for the development of a significant tropical cyclone within the next 24 hours remains high.
Yeah, I just want to point out maybe the reason for that. This is actually the wind shear tendency map right now. You can see around the system, especially to the west and south, and actually east as well, if you highlight it, 40 knot wind shear in some areas. So you're dealing with a lot of problems with that. This is where 96W is located right about. It's got moderate wind shear just to the northeast and northwest of it, but then it's got land interaction. So, I mean, models have been picking up on it for the past couple of days now, but it seems to really be struggling to get its act together.
But the JTWC says that it will track north. So when you look at that shear tendency, still the environment's still favourable, and the centre says that percentages remain high for it to develop further. I haven't had a chance to look at the various models, and whilst we're over here on the Westpac, we also have tropical storm Yagi.
Yeah, we do have Yagi. Another system there. It's intensified a bit more than what they were initially suspecting, if I'm not mistaken.
Just having a look at the information. Tropical storm 18 Yagi is 388 nautical miles southeast of Kadena Air Force Base, tracking north-northeast at 11 knots over the last 6 hours. The initial position is based with high confidence on a fully exposed low-level circulation, evident in an animated enhanced infrared satellite imagery to the northeast of an area of deep convection. And the area, the southwestern and southern quadrants, 35 to 40 knot winds, and environmental analysis reveals a marginal environment with moderate to strong 20 to 30 knot vertical wind shear, weak southwesterly outflow, no poleward outflow, and Stratton League sea surface temperature are very
Favorable at this
warm,
point.
30 Celsius.
Here's the JTWC warning map mode, the graphic for the forecast track for the next few days. The storm did actually intensify a little bit up to 40 knots, which they were not really initially suspecting. If you look at satellite imagery, the storm is still extremely sheared. It's taking another kind of unusual path, though, that you don't really see very often, where they're forecasting it to track into the Yellow Sea and then recurve and make landfall near Pyongyang. It's very rare to see a potential landfall in North Korea.
Strat, we need to keep in mind the steering mechanisms of the systems up to the present. Let's look back over the last few weeks. However, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre in their advisory indicates that Yagi has sped up over the last 6 hours and spending roughly 18 hours in a nearly quasi-stationary position along the western periphery of a deep layer steering ridge to the northeast.
Yeah, if you're looking at the graphic I'm showing right here, for the past over 3 days, the system has only moved maybe a couple hundred miles or so, which is, pretty slow movement. It's kind of curved between northeast to west to northeast and a bit northwest since, but it looks like it's gonna start moving on a bit. I think something to stress, though, is that the overall position at 4 or 5 days out is really uncertain at this point. You look at this cone right here, it's huge. It ranges from day 4, it could be in Beijing, all the way to right off the coast of western Japan. And then, so there's really a lot of uncertainty with it. The intensity is also kind of something interesting to look at. If I quickly go back to the wind shear map mode that I had up just a little bit ago, and I'll pull it back up again.
And whilst you do that, Strat, vertical wind shear will remain relatively high. Outflow will be restricted to the single westward channel during this period. The centre says that the system will begin to intensify slightly after the 48-hour mark is reached.
Yeah, it shows
deep mid-latitude trough approaching from the west.
Yeah, it shows it's in an area of really moderate wind shear in general, in between 10 and 20 knots where it is. It's not really favorable for intensification, which is why, if I go back here to this graphic, you can see it's only expected to peak at 50 knots. They currently expect it to maintain a 40 knot intensity for the next 2 days, really, which, you don't really see really often a storm maintain the exact same intensity for 2 days. So it's interesting to really see them forecast it. And in its forecast track, which is, if you go a bit northwesterly in general, it may be moving into an area of slightly lower wind shear in general, but it's not really going to be remaining in an area that tends to be favorable overall. If it moves east of forecast, it could find a more favorable environment, but it's pretty neutral right now. Over its lifespan, it's been very sheared in general. I'm going to pull up some satellite imagery for us right now up the system, and you'll be able to see what I mean almost immediately. Here we go.
At this point in time, they say that it will adopt a northerly track until such time that that new steering ridge kicks in, and they're indicating that Yagi is likely to make landfall along the North Korean coast within 100 hours. By 120 hours, the system is expected to re-merge into the Sea of Japan, then accelerate northeast.
And that goes along with this track forecast. Even though it's really uncertain, this cone is really big. If it does follow this exact track, it's pretty rare to see a system make landfall in North Korea like this. So even though we obviously don't really have viewers in North Korea, it still could have an impact on South Korea if the system moves even slightly eastward compared to the current forecast. So I think people around Seoul and most of South Korea, they're all in the forecast cone. They should be paying close attention to this system, even if it isn't expected to be really intense. You look right here, this is the satellite imagery. The center is going to be right here. It's obviously sheared off to the southwest. But you have some pretty intense convection, and if the system becomes more organized as it moves into an area where there might be slightly less wind shear, you're going to be running into a situation where you have lots of rain coming down on South Korea, and that could be a potential big risk for flooding. So I think that should be really kept in track of over the next couple of days.
Well, it's definitely one to keep an eye on, because it could impact the South Korea region, and the intensity, they're saying a peak intensity of, well, only 45 knots.
They actually increased it to 50 knots. It was originally 45 knots yesterday when we were streaming.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the JMA information on the system.
Yeah, the new advisory from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center peaks it at 50 knots at day 4.
And when the central pressure of Yagi, okay, located 22.2 degrees north, 133.1 degrees east. It's 40 knots, central pressure 991. And the JMA has it at 992, so maximum winds near the center 35, gusting 50 knots.
Yeah.
And they have it dropping down to 990, 2155 UTC. Then on the 12th of August, 18 UTC, they have it remaining at 990 millibars, but they have it 40 knots, gusts 60. So the JMA is going for 60 knots.
Yeah, what I'll actually do is I'll pull up the HWR forecast for Yagi right now. Let me switch back to my monitor. Here's the HWR forecast for right now. I'll actually zoom in a bit on the system. You can see it keeps it pretty disorganized, as you can tell just from what the wind field is going to be on the forecast. And it actually weakens it into a tropical depression around day 1.5 to 2, and doesn't really pick it back up as something that can be watched really until 57 hours. And at this point it keeps it around 50 knots, which is what, they're really forecasting with the system. But you can see it has a broad wind field that reaches from eastern tip here of part of China. I forget what the region is, sorry for not really remembering it, but it shows it impacting South Korea and North Korea at the same time. Actually shows it intensifying to 56 knots at 93 hours before moving into North Korea and China. This actually keeps it further west than the other forecasts, where the GFS has it here, making landfall east of the forecast track in South Korea. It's also notable that both of these models weaken the system in days 1 to 2 before picking back up on it towards day 3. They do have similar peaks, though, over in between 50 and 60 knots, which is something to keep in mind with it. So, there's Yagi right now in general. It's really the only, 96W is also a threat to land, but it's the only named system right now that's openly threatening land at the moment. And you know, it's something to keep track of because it does have a very wide cone. It can go all the way from China to Japan at this point. So it's something to keep track of. And I think moving to another gear, really, we should look at the rest of the Eastern Pacific because we haven't touched John and Kristy this whole stream right now. I'll pull up what the National Hurricane Center site for the Eastern Pacific. Here's Kristy, here's John. They're both at 65 miles an hour at this time. What have you guys been looking at with these systems over the past couple of days?
Lee, your thoughts on the systems in the East Pac? Unfortunately, I haven't really looked at the systems.
Well, I've not seen them much today, David, but I know they're much weaker than what they were a few days ago. John,
Yes,
John is really underperformed. John should have been a major a few days ago, but it's really gone. It's really lost its way.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising to see John not really get anywhere because now of course it doesn't really have anything left to do because it is in unfavorable sea surface temperatures at this point. But for most of its life, it was in a pretty low wind shear environment. It actually absorbed another system, Ileana, just off the coast of Mexico into its own outer bands. And the National Hurricane Center originally predicted that it would reach almost Category 4 status. I think some of us were prepping for a major hurricane that could have brought pretty significant impacts to Baja California if the track shifted just a little bit east. But fortunately with the system, it kind of just flopped on itself, really. Even though it's still in a low wind shear environment, it just really struggled with its convection and it didn't really get anywhere in general, which was really nice to see. I'll pull up some satellite imagery of the storm right now. You'll be able to see a little bit of it on the left side of the screen in the bottom left corner. That's its progression over the past day. It's really starting to wind down in general, and, you know, according to the National Hurricane Center, it should be dissipated within 3 days.
I've got some information.
Yeah, do you want to read it off?
On it, yep. Tropical storm Kristy, advisory 12.
Oh, Kristy, okay, let's take a look at Kristy then.
Yeah, so we'll go to Kristy while you bring up the imagery and I'll read the latest. 16.9 degrees north, 130.1 degrees west. It's about 1375 miles west-southwest of the southern tip of the Baja, California. Maximum sustained wind 65 miles per hour, gusting 100. Pressure movement is north at 7 miles per hour, and minimum central pressure is 994. There are no coastal watches or warnings in effect, and it's expected to make a turn, or is turning towards the north-northeast. Correction, a turn towards the northeast is expected within the next 48 or in the next few days, and maximum sustained winds 65 miles per hour, gusting 100.
Yeah, you can see right now, this is the satellite imagery of the system within the past few hours. It's a pretty small system. It was originally forecast to become a hurricane, but they really backed off on that because yesterday and 2 days ago, the system was very disorganized, much more so than they expected, which again was kind of surprising because it's also been in a very low wind shear environment. But, you know, even though this storm wasn't impacting land, fortunately, it isn't anticipated to during its lifespan. It has been in a pretty low wind shear environment. It will continue to do so for the next 2 days. But they still don't forecast it to peak as a hurricane right now. They forecast it to peak at 70 miles an hour sustained winds. Although, in the satellite imagery, it is starting to wrap around itself a little bit more. It is looking a bit more impressive than it was earlier today. So, you know, it isn't out of the question that it reaches minimal hurricane status, but right now it is not forecast to do so.
I think I provided the right information on Kristy. I now have John.
Alright, what do you have on John? Let me pull them up.
It's 900 kilometers west-northwest of the southern tip of Baja, California. Maximum sustained wind 65 miles per hour. Pressure movement west-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Now I'm on track. So this is the latest with Tropical Storm John. Central pressure 993. The general motion with a decrease in forward speed is expected through the weekend.
Yeah, I'll actually pull that up right now here with the National Hurricane Center forecast track. It really isn't expected to move too much. Yep.
Yep, they're saying that it's expected, or John's expected to weaken. A decrease in forward speed expected through the weekend, as mentioned, and maximum sustained winds have decreased to near 65 miles per hour, and additional weakening is forecast. John will most likely become a remnant low this weekend.
Yeah, and something that's just interesting to notice. I was actually just looking right here, and I noticed the wind speed probability map mode. As John dissipates, it probably will start to interact with a weakening Kristy as they both move towards each other in general. I hadn't checked it in a couple of days since yesterday, but I wanted to actually check what the computer models have to say, because at least with these two and potential Fujiwara impact, the GFS has Kristy weaker than it actually is right now. Actually, this is 6Z. Here we go. That's more accurate. This is 18Z. But you can see it has Kristy right here, John to the north and east weakening. And you can see as it brings Kristy north, it brings them close to interacting. It isn't really the same as what is trying to say earlier today, because they forecast John to really weaken and open up before it can actually interact with Kristy, and then Kristy will weaken in pretty much the same area as John did, or just to the south and west of it a couple days prior. And there's Kristy's track again right there. By the way, guys, if you have any questions, make sure to tag us at Force13, and we'll be sure to answer them. I've noticed a pretty active chat, so if you guys have any questions about any of the storms, any of the basins, just let us know. I actually see someone right now commenting about the dry air, and I'm pretty sure they're referencing the Saharan air layer in the Atlantic Ocean. I'll actually pull it up because I had this up. I was thinking that there might be discussion about it. I'll actually slow this down because there's a good chunk of missed pages here. There's a big burst that's really just come off, although the air layer is weaker than it was, a month ago. Of course, it's still pretty prevalent over the main development region. What do you have to say about that?
Sorry, what system are we talking about?
We're talking about the Saharan air layer in the Atlantic.
Oh, Lee, you've been following the flow, mate?
Yes, even though I've just come back from the toilet.
The Saharan dust.
Yeah, the Sahara dust's quite bad actually.
Yeah, you can see right now, just off of this graphic, that it's still reaching into the Caribbean at this point. It's really suppressing tropical waves that are coming off the coast of West Africa right now. It's starting to move northward a little bit over the past few weeks, but it's still really prevalent over the area.
I think it should weaken in the second half of August to allow some sort of development over the Atlantic in late August. Going into September, so it's one to watch, one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, as we move towards the peak of the season, that's something that we obviously start to look at more. It was really interesting to see people commenting about it last night into today. There was a poll I posted on the community tab of what people think the rest of the season will be like in the Atlantic. That got, I think it's over 400 responses now, which I was, really happy to see the community interaction with it. And there was a good chunk of people trying to hint at, that the main development region is actually warming up in its sea surface temperatures. Although it's keen to note that it's still colder than previous years, and the Saharan air layer is still really prevalent at this time. If you've been looking at the Force 13 forecast for the year, we do expect less right about an average or a little bit below average season, with activity focused primarily in the northwest Atlantic closer to the east coast, and some activity in the Caribbean. We are expecting a weaker main development region season this year because of certain environmental factors. And let's see, there's actually some questions in chat now too. There's someone asking if Hurricane Hector will impact the Johnston Islands. I will actually pull up Hector's track forecast right now and put that on the screen, because here's the 3-day forecast for Hector. Johnston Islands are under a tropical storm watch. The system has become more broad in its imagery appearance, and there is a pretty decent chance that they will get some impacts of outer bands of the system. Of course, heavy surf and rip currents are going to be a problem there. That is why there's a watch in effect. If I show the wind field right now, here's the current wind field of John. They're expecting it to start making its turn to the west-northwest and to the northwest over the next couple of days. As it gets towards the region, it's going to get closest around a day from now, actually. Well, a day and a half from now, because this is 8 p.m. Friday, Hawaii time. But any shift in the track to the south may potentially bring tropical storm force winds to the island, so there is some risk for the Johnston Islands at this time. And there was another question in the chat that I want to get to. Someone's asking, do we think Hector is a candidate to break the single storm ace record? Definitely not. It's definitely not going to get to that point. It wasn't even a Category 5. It peaked as a high in Category 4, though. It did get close. But it's weakened considerably since then, down 35 mile an hour sustained winds. It's up to 120 from earlier at 110. The new ATWCF might be out on it. It is not. It still says 105 knots from a little while ago. But even though Hector's a rare system to cross all the way from the eastern Pacific to the western Pacific, it's definitely not going to be an ace record breaker. I will say, though, that we were really fortunate. We kind of dodged a bullet here, proverbially, with Hector, because it initially looked like it did have a chance of making potential landfall on Hawaii, on the Big Island, or one of the islands. So seeing the ridge of high pressure to the north of it be stronger than initially anticipated, and having the system move south of the islands and really only get some rain from the system and rough surf was really fortunate to see. Don't you guys agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Hawaii, the Big Island did miss, although the
NHC...
There was tropical storm warning at one point, but
yep,
it was really fortunate to see the system go a bit further south than the initial 5-day forecast said, especially because it was peaking right near the point where it would have hit the islands otherwise if it were to come that way. So it was really nice to see it not really get out there.
Well, the NHC did say it would come to within, what, 100 miles, nautical miles from the southern tip of the Big Island, so another one.
Yeah, so it was nice to see. Now it's significantly past the islands. You know, they're well in the clear. I would say there's probably still some swells impacting it at this point in time. So rough surf is definitely still going to be a problem there. But, you know, the Hawaii is completely out of it now, mostly, and it's nice to see them in the clear. Someone asked in chat about Shanshan. How is it surviving? Right now, I'll pull up some satellite imagery for you about the system. It is not having a good time, really. It's deteriorated considerably in the past day. It looks like it's actually about to go extratropical. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next advisory it was no longer tropical, which is fortunate to see. Initially, I was anticipating having to cover this storm again tomorrow as still a tropical system. But it's nice to see it starting to die out. Here's the center of circulation right here, and convection is being heavily displaced to the east and northeast at this point as it starts to quickly move away from Japan. Yesterday, even though that wasn't really the peak of the system yesterday, it was its closest approach, just offshore, paralleling the Tokyo metro area, actually delivering a very large area of gale force sustained winds, impacting a really nice area of central Japan. There actually was typhoon sustained winds on the very eastern parts of just north of Tokyo metro, but fortunately what happened was the main ray bands actually stayed offshore and were on the east side of the system, so Japan got less rain than they could have potentially gotten from the system, which was really nice to see. I know, David, you've been keeping track of Shanshan to some extent. What have you really been thinking with it over the past couple of days as it got its closest approach to Japan?
Well, in addition to the structure of Hector, Shanshan was impressive. I've actually managed to capture the International Space Station flying over it. And I think I have some of the footage in the opening minute of one of my updates. I've been viewing a couple of live streaming cams at Tokyo Tower, another one in the same region, and visibility was less than probably a mile, and I had a look at it late yesterday afternoon in Tokyo. It's all clear, so they didn't get what I expected, Strat. I thought it might have been a bit more severe, and well, I'm going to say they dodged a bullet too, because the Japanese Meteorological Agency, they really didn't have that much information on their website. But I haven't looked at the rainfall, but I have used the Pivotal Weather website and the GFS model for precipitation, and I've provided that in a couple of the updates on that system. However, I just looking at the JMA website, they have 96W and they have 97W to the east of 96W.
Yeah, 97W is one now. I think in general though,
with percentages.
Yeah, I think in general though with Shanshan, it was another scenario where I think we got kind of fortunate, because a few days ago, Shanshan was in terms of satellite appearance, a type of system that looked like it was ready for potential rapid intensification, according to some of the members on the project, and just its overall structure. And fortunately, it just never really got to where we thought it was going to get. Initially, it was supposed to become a major hurricane, or at least on the Saffir-Simpson scale, a pretty strong typhoon, but it just never got there. Its structure never really held up, and I think it peaked at 85 knots, actually. And it was only 70 knots offshore Japan, which was really nice to see that it didn't really have the potential impacts that it could have. And actually, shifting gears a little bit, I see a question asking how rare was it for John to absorb Ileana like that? You don't usually see that happen typically. It's just they were formed so close together, and John's inflow was just that much larger that Ileana was just forced to open up into a wave and actually become an outer band of John as it reaches peak intensity. So that's really what we saw with it. It doesn't really happen that often. And I also saw another question about Debby earlier. I would like to point out that Debby has dissipated at this point in time right here as of 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. It's currently at 40-mile-an-hour sustained winds, but it's opening up into a trough right now. It is post-tropical. I'll pull up satellite imagery quickly just to show you guys why that is once this page loads up. Remnants of Debby right here. You'll see here's the center of circulation right here opening up, and convection is really displaced and weakened in general to the point where it can't be classified as a tropical cyclone anymore, as it is over much colder sea surface temperatures. It's completed its transition into post-tropical cyclone and should open up into a trough and get absorbed and dissipate within the next 2 days at most. I know some of us were keeping track of it in general because it was unexpected, really. It was a 20% chance of formation.
It was indeed, so it was very low.
And, you know, but it quickly acquired some tropical characteristics and formed unexpectedly.
I will say for the UK people that some of its energy might actually be used in a low pressure system towards the UK by the weekend. Might actually bring some much needed rain for the drought hit areas of southern England.
Yeah.
But so it's actually good news for us up here in the UK. But back to you anyway. That's what I think.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Sorry, Australia, I'm monitoring. I've actually got my third computer operational because I'm just monitoring the chat. For those wondering about Nathan, he is enjoying his annual break, and he's down there in the Caribbean
He's in
sea
Dominican
region.
Republic.
He's in the Dominican Republic right now.
Yeah. He will be home next week. I think it's Tuesday or something like that.
And Strat,
hope he's a good holiday.
The imagery from me is the life of
Shanshan, right?
Shanshan, yep. Up to a few hours ago.
Yeah.
But it was a impressive system, the eye feature, and it defied the odds. It did intensify, and I would invite the viewers to just go back through the updates, and you can actually see the satellite imagery which is currently on the screen, and it's been a good system, but we still have Yagi and 97W. What is 97W going to do?
Yeah, I'll try to actually pull some satellite imagery for 97W right now. It's definitely, I think it's the only system we haven't really touched on. It isn't even highlighted on RAMD as a place I can get satellite imagery of the system from. If I quickly go over here to the ATCF courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, though, I will be able to show it here quickly. I'll be able to get a visible satellite of it, and I'll pull that up quickly right here. It's in an area, I forget this island chain. You probably know the geography better than me for this region, but here's 97W. It's just a weak area of convection. It's not really anything much. An interesting thing to see with it, though, is how some of the models play around with it. If I go right here to some of the forecast models and go to the Western Pacific, here's the GFS. 97W is going to be around here, and it develops it into the kind of this broad mess, really, that isn't really centralized in a single point, and just moves it northwest in general. I don't even really know how to describe what that really looks like towards Taiwan and China as it moves in there. I'll actually zoom in on it here with this. Where is it? Oh, that's actually something completely different. That's actually really interesting. This is actually what the GFS focuses on, is 97W. This small system right here, if I go back.
And as I mentioned earlier, I haven't had a chance to look at the models, but what I did look at late yesterday afternoon, they would think the GFS really had these systems not looking that healthy, but I'm talking about the Westpac, but
yeah.
On the screen, It's the Vorak on what was it, 90?
This is
on
97W.
Yagi.
I think it's actually something I didn't really notice when I was looking over this model run for the first time from the GFS. But looking at it again, this is just, it's kind of off topic, kind of on topic. Here's what the GFS says 97Ws. It says it's this system here that gets kind of absorbed. If I go specifically to what the GFS is saying here, it develops it into this really small system that peaks as a tropical storm before dissipating before it gets to Japan. So it's really a completely different system than this kind of mess that you see approaching Taiwan. So it's really interesting to see what other models would say. This is the European model on it right now. This is what 97W would be, this little circle of convection right here. And it brings this whole mess of convection west-northwest over the next 5 to 7 days into Taiwan and China. It's really interesting to see that, such a broad area of circulation like that.
Strat 97W is currently located 14.7 degrees north, 148.6 degrees east. It's 15 knots, central pressure 1006.
Yeah, and that's the Joint Typhoon Warning Center page you have up. Do you mind going back up to the top of that? It was right there. You had coverage.
Oh, sorry, wrong one, that one. Yeah, you want this one in the ATCF. Is that what you want?
JTWC homepage. I will make sure to include that in the blooper reel.
There we are. There's the homepage.
Yeah, there you can see Yagi and Shanshan, and there's 96W.
Yeah, well, I've got a blooper there, but
That's okay.
Now, yeah, I'm looking at the stream, and now we're good with the overall pattern. There we are.
Yeah.
And you can see the warnings on all the information on the right-hand side. And Stratton Lee and viewers, I have not seen it so busy here in the Westpac. And I'm going to throw a spanner in the work. When it comes to non-official sources such as all the models, Strat, I know you would agree with me, but there are many models to which we don't even, we the public, don't even get to see. We only get a handful, and caution needs to be applied when viewing.
Once we get more than a few days out, you can't ever say anything is really certain with forecast models. That's something to really highlight.
Yeah, this is something that I stress, and even in my updates, caution needs to be applied. That is my standard response. Even over here, I operate the AU channel with Jason, who's behind the scenes. He's over there in Perth, and he is one of the most senior technical person that Force 13's got, in addition to Nathan, of course. And Nathan, as we know, is a very talented person, but I looked at the tropical cyclone formation probability product, and there could be something down. It's only an indicator off Bougainville Island. And Lee, that's here in the southern hemisphere, just to the northeast of the Solomon Islands or Papua New Guinea. And Lee, considering where we are, looking at the southern hemisphere, from your position, could we see an early start? And considering what's and noting what's going on up there in the Westpac.
I think it's a bit early to really
speculate.
It's
a bit early to be talking about the southern cyclone season, but what I will say is I think it will be slightly later start this year, David, compared to last year. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
And with the Westpac, looking at the current state of affairs, did you think it would be so active? And are we going to see further areas of interest behind 97W in the Westpac?
I think what's going to happen after 96W.
I think according...
I think there might be another one or two.
Yeah, I think according to the models,
I feel it will start to quieten down for a wee while.
I think according to the models, things should calm down a bit, but it is interesting to see an area to watch, that really broad area of convection that the models are showing. It'd be interesting to see if that potentially coalesces into something more defined.
Very interesting strat.
And there's 96W right there, the cyclone warning alert.
Yeah, that's 96W, and you can see the...
What's the forecast for
that? It's forecast to kind of either stay stationary and move very slowly to the north over the next 3 to 4 days.
Right.
I think this is off topic. I also saw someone talking about Puerto Rico and what happened in the chat. I know today, actually, Puerto Rico and the U.S. government revised their death toll from Maria up from 64 to over 1,100, and that's really a really sad thing to hear, that things were so underprepared and that so much damage happened from one storm. I don't know if you guys heard about that yet. But what were you guys looking at with that?
I did cite a news report Puerto Rico, and this is the latest on Shanshan, or Shanshan.
Yeah, there's Shanshan's track. It's supposed to dissipate within a day and a half to 2 days at this point, as it goes fully extratropical. I wouldn't be surprised if it's sooner than that. It's just, in terms of what I was talking about, it's just, it's really sad to see, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if Swirling Magnetard just got here, but we did actually just bring that up. The death toll is revised from 64 to over 1,000, and there are studies that show that it could be over 4,000 to 6,000. So, as a place that covers these kind of systems, we really want to make sure that we do our best to keep track of these things and inform people to the best of our ability to help maybe prevent even a single one of those lives being lost. So, I mean, it's really sobering to see in general, but hopefully we can do some service to help. And, I think that's what we're doing right now. I think, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but the most dangerous storm at this moment is probably 96W, right?
I would say Yagi.
Yagi.
Storm Yagi, looking at the track on the screen, Strat, but I would also agree with 96.
96 and Yagi.
And I'll pull up Yagi's
Yagi, Tropical
right
Storm.
Here. Yeah.
And a 96W behind it.
Yep, so here's Yagi's satellite imagery right here on the big screen below my face. It's still heavily sheared, but it could be in a moderate environment for some intensification. David there has the track forecast up. We were talking about it earlier, but it's supposed to have a very odd angle. But it's so far out, the cone here is actually really big. It's unpredictable at this point what might actually happen with it. You were mentioning an odd steering current earlier, and that is probably what's causing such a big range in terms of what they're anticipating with it.
Yes, as I mentioned, Strat, it's the steering mechanisms. I think this impacted on forward Typhoon Shanshan. It wasn't expected to, well, re-intensify, but it defied the odds and it came back.
Yeah. I think actually we are right about the time where we're gonna have to wrap things up. It is 8:30 Eastern now.
Yeah, you've had an hour, Strat, so
12:30 a.m. UTC. So do you guys have any last words that you want to say before everything goes out?
Lee, over to
I'll
you.
just say keep safe to the people that are going to be impacted from Hector after there's any people that live on Johnston Island. Wish them the best of luck. We also wish people the best of luck with the remains of Shanshan as well, because I think that's still causing a bit of weather as well.
David, you got anything to say?
And what about you, David?
Well, I will continue to bring the latest information via the updates, and I've really enjoyed this live stream. The interaction from the viewers is much appreciated, and the technical operation has been in the hands of Strat, and he's doing an outstanding job. And,
absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm yet to push the live streaming button on the main channel, but that's in the future. However, I'm focusing on providing the updates, being part of a live broadcast.
Yep.
But the threat remains for South Korea, I think possibly Vietnam.
Southern China, Hainan Island in particular, out of those, they were hit by Sun Tin last night, or not last night, last month. So, they've been dealing with a lot. Yes,
there's just no respite, as I mentioned, especially Vietnam, Korea, Japan. And as I said, we've got 97. We don't know what 97 is going to do. And we've got 96 W. But Strat, it's been good, my friend.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap everything up for tonight's stream, guys. I really hope that coming out here was worth your time. Make sure all the links for us are down below in the description. Our YouTube channel, of course, at Force13. Facebook and Twitter, search Force13 in text. We also have a Patreon. We have a lot of goals that we're trying to fill out now. The project, we're actually trying to expand a lot. We're really happy with the success we've had so far, but to really keep going, we do always need some help. Any contributions really appreciated monthly through Patreon or Super Chat, which we have right here. We have a lot of plans in the near future that we're going to be pretty excited to announce. I'm not going to say them myself because it's Nathan's spot to really say them when he gets back from vacation. But thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully you had a good time here, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. There probably will be another stream tomorrow. I will be posting another question in the community polls right after this, so make sure to check that out. Make sure to have a good night, everyone. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.